My name's Charlie McKenna, and I am honored to introduce our next speaker, Amy Slater from Amy Slater Consulting. Now, she's got quite a list of accomplishments. I'm going to try to highlight a few of them for you because I think you're really going to enjoy what she has to say about selling. So, Amy is the founder and CEO of Amy Slater Consulting. She's got 25 years of leadership and sales, global sales experience. Her mission is to improve and transform culture wherever she is. Her passion is in helping and empowering people and getting extraordinary results and ultimately growing revenue. She's worked at a number of companies that you've heard about. Rovi, which is an Apttus customer where Amy was speaking with them from last year to Accelerate. She also was at Axiom and a little company called Salesforce. She's also been at Cisco, Cable and Wireless, Quest, and AT&T. She's a frequent speaker at events such as the 2014 Forrester Research Conference in San Francisco. She was a panelist at the Domo Women in Business Tour, the Executive Series, and she was a keynote speaker last year, as I said, at Accelerate 2016. She's also a member of Advancing Women Executives and Women in Technology International. And this past October, she was awarded a spot on the list of top 100 sales operations and sales enablement leaders. And did I also mention she's an author? She's written this book, which you're going to get a copy of as you're walking out later on. She'll talk a little bit about that. And to cap things off, she's also a mother of 3. So she's a little bit busy, but she took out some time in her schedule to speak to us. So Amy, come on up.
Thanks. So I have to say it's a little strange seeing people with headphones on. It's a little bizarre, but anyways, I don't have to scream. So if I do speak too loudly, just raise your hand and say, shh, you're talking too loudly. So I'm honored to be here today for the second year in a row, as Charlie said. And I'm here to talk about being human and the human side of leadership and how you can transform people's hearts, minds, and wallets. So I learned about being a leader from my late father, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. My father was a leader of food scientists at companies like Carnation, Nestle Foods, and Quaker Oats. I like to say he was authentic before authenticity became cool, as we hear a lot about it today. My dad, John Vanatta, taught me that leaders have a direct impact on company culture. So why should you listen to me? I mean, you heard about my background, so what? Why are you sitting here? Well, I have to say, I've walked in many of your shoes over the last 25 years. I've been a sales leader, I've been a salesperson, I've run global sales operations, I've been a parent, I still am, forever. a sentence for that, a life sentence. So I know what it is like to sit and try to empower people, to try to drive them, to try to drive change, and to grow revenue. And as you've heard probably throughout the couple of days here, the world has changed. In order to grow our brands, our revenue, and our employee retention, we need to focus on the people side. Last year, I talked about people, process, and technology. I talked about the entire trifecta. But today, I'm here to talk to you about people, because people are the connective tissue of companies. Technology has been the leading driver of change and transformation over the last few decades. And we've had to create process to support the new paradigms. But what about the people? Fortune magazine, I picked this up last week when I was flying to New York for business, and the top 100 best companies to work for. And so they changed their criteria this year, and they said, I'll quote what they said because it completely resonated, and as you notice, I have it in big print because I can't see without my glasses. And since we know great workplaces require commitment from the top, additional weight will be placed on evaluating executive teams' leadership effectiveness, including their ability to connect authentically with their people and their skill in communicating a clear path to success. All these elements will be assessed not only via information provided by the companies, but also validated by employee surveys. So it's not just me that's saying this. Every single company in this top 100 said that employee satisfaction and employee engagement was number one for them. And so they're not just successful because people like them, they have great revenue and they can transform their companies. So I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so and I'll share with you some traits that can really help with that engagement. And I will highlight the key leadership characteristics that are critical in support of this effort. As I said, don't just take my word for it. When I was preparing this talk a couple of months ago, every time I turned around, I was reading articles that said, cherish your employees, engage with them. Words like high esteem, create a clear path, culture path, have empathy, engage. So these are words that are all about the human element. So it's all about that transformation. It matters. It matters because your actions have a direct impact on their hearts and on their minds. How do you know that they're genuinely interested in what they say or what they do? How do you know? You might ask them. And it's not just your employees, it's also your customers, but that's another talk. How do your people know what your expectations are if you don't tell them, if you don't create a vision? How do they know that you're invested in their development? Those are all questions that your employees are asking. One of the greatest things you can do as a leader is acknowledge their wins. When I was about 10, just a few years ago, I went to the office with my dad. My dad worked in this old 70s building in Van Nuys, California, and he ran research and development for Carnation Company. Dog food, powdered milk. They had those great Carnation bars. If any of you are as old as I am, you might remember those. And I used to eat those for breakfast every day. And I went to his office with him, and that was like the highlight for me. Those were the days when it was rare to have a day off of school, unlike our children today that seem to have a day off of school like every other week. And I went to his office with him, and we were walking down the hall, and we came across George. And George was one of his food scientists. And he stopped George in the hall, and he said, "Amy, I'd like to introduce you to George. George is one of the best food scientists in the industry." Okay, number one, he was about 25 years old, George, but my dad said he was the best. And number two, he didn't introduce George to me to say, "I want you to meet my daughter." He said, "Amy, I want you to meet George." So, of course, I shook his hand and smiled as a 10-year-old child will do, and we walked away. And my dad said, "You know why I did that, don't you?" I said, "I don't know. He sure looked happy. He had a big smile on his face." And he said, "Exactly." He made him feel important, even just to his daughter. He made him feel important. So fast forward a few years later, like 40, and I was at my office, and I brought my 16-year-old daughter with me to the office. I had just started my job. I was probably about 4 weeks into the job, and we walked by someone's desk of a gentleman that worked for me. And I stopped and I said, "Allie, I want you to meet Corey." And I said, I couldn't have done the last month of my job without his help. He's taught me everything I need to know right now about this company, and I'm so grateful. And he had this huge smile on his face. He had not been at the company very long either. And we walked away. My daughter was 16, and she turns and looks at me and she says, "I know why you did that." I said, "Why?" She said, "You wanted to make him feel good, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You learned that from Papa, right?" And I said, "Yes." And so it seems so simple, and it only takes a few minutes. It is simple. But the dividends pay forever. And when I became a new sales manager, my father had given me the book, The 1 Minute Manager. And that's been around for a long time. It just takes a minute. And sometimes we think that it takes a long time to sit and coach and teach and pay attention. But in reality, it's just minutes of time. So if you take the time to reward and acknowledge, and rewards don't have to be monetary. They don't have to be a plaque. It could be a piece of paper. It could be a handwritten note to their family member to say how much you appreciate the work of their spouse or of their father or whomever. Those are the kinds of things that people remember. Statistically speaking, it rings true. 55% of top performing companies, probably a lot of them in this Fortune magazine, are driving productivity and realize that they need to invest in sales enablement technology, hence CPQ and Apttus, right? That those are critical tools for salespeople, and then they know that you're investing in them. 71% of C-level executives believe that sales productivity is critical in achieving growth. So as a leader, if you can't drive productivity, what does that mean for your company and your company's future success? And 55% say that people in sales don't have the right skills to be successful. And I have to say, I noticed in my career over the last 25 years, the amount of focus on training diminished over time. And then as technology has picked up, now we have the ability to train and leverage at scale technology. So those are the kinds of tools. But training isn't just about a formal program, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And you need to listen. You don't just want to talk at your employees or tell them what to do. Tell your salespeople that they need to hit their number. You need to listen. You need to ask good questions. I was a sales leader for over 20 years, and I was religious about having one-on-ones with my team. I never canceled them unless it was a customer appointment or something like that. And at one point, I had 14 direct reports. I spent 2 days a week meeting with each team member for an hour, every single week, because that's what mattered. And did we always talk about the number? Nope. That maybe took 15 minutes. I might ask them, how are your children? How are you doing? How are you feeling? How are your customers? Are you achieving what you want to achieve? And I would ask them questions. You're not going to drive revenue simply by pounding on them, because what's happening above you as a sales leader? You're getting pounded over the head to bring in the numbers. I see some salespeople rolling their eyes and looking at each other and smiling, because it's not just about that. That I found over time, when you lead from your heart, the results happen. And it's magic. That's part of the title of my book, is about magic. That you never know what a little inspiration might do. And the fact that you might ask about someone's family, and they might share that they've had a hard time. And you say, great, how can I help? Then when you need something from them, guess what? They know that you're there. Celebrate them, acknowledge them, recognize them, and do what you can to make them a part of that successful journey. One of my favorite thought leaders is Simon Sinek, and I'm sure most of you have heard of him and have watched his videos or read some of his books. And I'm going to read this one because it has such a strong impact. If you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes believing in things and being passionate about them is all it takes. Another story of someone that used to work for me had been working on my team for about 3 or 4 months. Over the course of time, I had to increase his job scope. In fact, by increasing his job scope, it gave me the ability to cancel one of my hiring requisitions because we were trying to be cautious with money. And I knew that giving him more responsibility was going to be a bit of a burden, and I wanted to give him a raise. And he had been brought in at a lower salary than what his prior company had provided for him. And so I knew going in that told him I would reevaluate at 6 months. But we were 3 months in, and I had given him more responsibility. And he said, it's really kind of tight for me. Is there anything you can do? I said, absolutely. I'll go to bat for you to get you more money. I thought it would be easy because I thought I had some authority and that I was empowered to do those things, but I wasn't. I went to HR, I went to my boss, and they said, he hasn't been here long enough. I said, yeah, but we just gave him a whole new responsibility, and I saved you all $150,000 by not hiring somebody else. So I had to go back to him and say, I didn't get it, but I promise I'll keep on trying. So another month goes by, and he comes to my office and says, can I talk to you? And I don't know how many of you out there are sales leaders, and you know that look in their eye that says, oh gosh, he's quitting. And I had that pit in my stomach that I didn't know what I was going to do if he left. He said, can we talk outside? And then I really knew that I was going to have to start recruiting, right? And we step outside, and he said, I need to let you know I've gotten a job offer. And I said, outside the company? And he said, yes, outside the company. And I had tears. I'm kind of an emotional person. I had tears well up in my eyes because I really valued him as a human being, not just that I was going to be left out in the cold. And he said, but I turned it down. He said, I turned down the job. And then the tears really started. And he said, I turned it down because I didn't want to leave you in a lurch. And I said, wow, that's so great. He said, you've gone to bat for me, and I am grateful for that. And he said, I don't know how much longer I can go with this particular salary. He says, but I know that you'll go to bat to try to get me what I hope to get. So, of course, wiped away my tears, walked back inside, and I was on it for the next 3 months to get him an increase. And I did. And that speaks to what Simon Sinek says, right? Despite the money, he felt indebted to me and didn't want to leave me in the cold. So he was doing that for me. And so those are the kinds of things as a leader. And so as a result, you talk about, well, what does this mean from an ROI standpoint? And it's all about the money and the revenue. Well, guess what? I saved the company $150,000 by not hiring someone to fill a particular role. I gave some of that responsibility to somebody else with a little raise. And then the productivity can continue to grow. So those are the kinds of things that your employees will value. And the number one, and most of you probably know this, the number one reason why people leave companies is for what? They leave companies because of their direct boss. Statistics show that employees will sacrifice up to $17,000 to work for the right boss. They'd rather take a pay cut to work for the right boss than to get a pay, keep their pay, and work for the wrong one. It matters, and Simon Sinek knows that too. And as I've talked about before, it's also about investing in your people. And I don't just mean money. There's meetings, there's trainings that don't have to cost money. It's allowing them to share their ideas. Some of the things that really show your investment is to sit with your team and ask them what they want. Where do they think they want to be? How can they contribute to the mission of your organization? Your salespeople will know if you're invested in them or if you're just invested in the business. And I'd like to suggest when you invest in them, the business flourishes. And I have seen that countless times in my career. That when you take the time to have a career conversation instead of a conversation about the money, you get the money. You'll get the money. And that's where this whole wallets thing comes in, right? You're going to increase money in their pocket, and you're going to increase money in your company's pocket by investing time and investing your heart and your mind into your people. So what? So what do I walk away with? And, I set out on this conversation to say, what are those key traits and what are some things that you can do in order to help develop your employees and salespeople? Love your team. I know it sounds kind of hokey. People use the word love all the time. My kids say I love you to everybody. It's so strange. They're on the phone with their friend. They're like, love you, love you. I'm like, seriously? How long have you known that person? I don't know, just met her. Like, they love everybody. So I think it's okay if you love your team. It means showing interest in them. It means when you walk in the door of your office building, do you say hi to the people that you work with? I had a boss that walked in, walked by my team, walked past my office, and went into his office. And we would sit side by side in our offices and never say hello. Do you think my team felt valued by him, or that I felt valued by him? He didn't value us enough to stop and say good morning. It's that basic, and it's that simple. Ask them about their weekend, but you have to be sincere. Like I started out this discussion, it's about being authentic. So think about it. Think about how you might treat your friends if you saw your friends in the morning, if you walked by them. You want to see them, invest in them, say hello, know them. I was told a story about a CEO who worked for a company, and they had a big production plant. And most of the employees spoke Spanish, and he was an American man. He went out of his way to learn Spanish. So that every morning he walked in the door and he walked around the floor of the people in the morning and asked them how they were in Spanish. So he didn't just take the time to say hello, he asked about them in their language. He spoke their language. And that's what we need to do. Whether it's a foreign language or the same language, we need to be able to speak to our salespeople in their language, in a language that they understand, not just in our executive speak. Praise your team. Praising your team shows that you're actually listening. You're listening to what they say. You're listening to what they say to one another. You're not just in your ivory tower crunching numbers, which is what you do. And there's so many tools today in technology. I happen to have worked and work for some of the greatest companies that are trying to create sales capacity so that you can be more productive. But what has happened to the art of coaching? Because we get so bogged down chasing numbers and chasing after deals that we don't spend time actually coaching. And talk about power. When you're a leader, it isn't always about the power that you have. You have power and you have authority. Use your power sparingly. Engage your team to have them develop what they think is a good sales cadence. When do they want to have meetings? Vary your meeting times if you have a global team. Be cognizant of the fact that some people may be up at midnight or on a phone call at 5 a.m. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference. And share your vision. They need to know where you want to go. Where do you want to take them? Not just what the company wants, but what do you want? What do you want professionally, and what do you want personally? And as I said before, invest in them. Invest in the resources. And as I close out, I want to talk a little bit about what I started saying, which is about being an authentic leader. And does it really matter? And how do you ever know? How do you ever know if people think those things of you, that they feel valued? Well, you know sometimes when it's too late. You know when someone is giving your eulogy, right? And they start to talk about you, and you hope that they're saying really nice things about you and that you mattered. I have the honor of being able to officiate my father's service in a couple of weeks. And you talk about leaving a legacy, hence the website legacy.com. And so we put my father's obituary on legacy.com so that people obviously could see it and that they could leave their thoughts about my father. And so all of us have fathers. That's one thing we all have in common. You've had a father at some point, at least who helped you be born. Whether you have one now or not is immaterial. But my father doesn't get a chance to hear what everybody thinks of him. I know what I thought about him, but I'm his daughter, I'm his little girl, and I, in my mind, think he's larger than life, he was a great leader, but was it only me? Am I the only one that thought that? But it comes full circle, and I have an opportunity to be able to witness what other people thought about my father. And in closing, I want to share something that ties us all together because it brings us full circle, that says it matters. How you treat your people matters. And I'm going to share something that was just posted coincidentally yesterday on legacy.com. I was only going to read part of it, but do you want me to read the whole thing? I'll read the whole thing. You guys got your headphones on anyways. You can choose not to listen. My sincere condolences to John Vanetta's family and friends, and a special thank you to his caregivers during his last years. I first met John in 1971 in the Carnation Research Lab in Van Nuys, that big building. I did not know then that he would become a prominent figure in my professional life. John was a genius, plain and simple. I remember listening in awe as he once told me that he had a photographic memory and could write with both hands at the same time. He used to do that on a whiteboard, and he would write like this. It was just the way his brain worked. Crazy stuff. I didn't inherit that. As a leader, here's the tie-in. As a leader, he had the ability to simplify the complex. He always knew the right thing to say, and you knew that he always had your back. Thanks so much for joining my session. And don't forget, books, they're signed by me as well. Not with your name, obviously I didn't know you were going to be here, but have a little magic and take care of the human connection. Thanks.